This is War Stories, a cybersecurity podcast where we extract the best stories from the field of penetration testing. Your host is Zac Davis, experienced cyber and physical security tester. War Stories is brought to you by CyberCoffee, engineered and roasted to keep you hacking the planet all day and night. Give it a try at drinkcybercoffee.com and use promo code WAR10 to save 10%. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm your host, Zac Davis. Don't forget to try out CyberCoffee. If you are a hacker and you're not drinking CyberCoffee, what are you doing? Are you drinking CyberCoffee, Matt?
I have not had it yet. I would love to try it.
We're going to send you home with a bag. I think you'll like it.
All right, sounds good.
So we have an awesome guest here today, Matthew Freilich, a hardware hacking specialist, also one of my best friends. Yeah. Matthew.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
How you doing? So I think you know the format, but to get started, who are you? How'd you get here? What's your career trajectory, and what do you work on these days?
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. So I have been working in cybersecurity for roughly 15 years now. I had a somewhat circuitous, I guess, route.
Yeah, we crossed paths a couple times at a few years there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have been working in I think what most people kind of get their start with. Initially, you do work in vulnerability work, scans and things of that nature, but then had more opportunity to do network pen testing, web application pen testing, and I did that for a couple of years, but really had a great opportunity and chance to kind of move into things that I thought were super interesting, which was hardware. And so I got to work in hardware initially from two different routes. One of them was some projects that dealt with medical devices, and another one was getting to work with ATMs. And
very cool. Yeah, fun fact, I got to mention it in case any of my family's watching. Matt tested the pacemaker that is in my grandfather's chest. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy I could help.
Yeah.
And so so I work at Protiviti, which has given me a lot of opportunity to really grow in that space and deal with a lot of that kind of work. And it's been something that I've really loved. And now I work with people that are, super talented, smarter than me, and I get to see what they're always doing all the time. So I really love it a lot.
Sounds awesome. Cool. So coming from the hardware perspective, what kind of cool tools do you have a hardware tool to tell us about, or do you have something else as a favorite tool today?
So I think there's two things I'll kind of mention. One of them is that hardware testing, oftentimes you're looking at a bare circuit board, you're looking at a device that you may not know how it operates and what it does necessarily. Sometimes they don't tell you a lot of information. And there's a tool called a logic analyzer. And a logic analyzer allows you to connect to various pins or areas on the board or on a chip.
Isn't there 4 pins you can usually, I forget, there's letters that are associated?
Yeah, UART is for creating a serial connection, oftentimes universal asynchronous receive transmit. And a logic analyzer helps you to identify what is the various types of data traversing the pins or the connections between a chip and the various peripherals that can exist on a device. And it's really nice because you don't necessarily have to know exactly how something is working or exactly how what it's doing, but you can connect to it. You can record the data when you power it on. You record the data that's transiting those traces, and then you can mess with them on your computer. You can translate them into different types of protocols and see which one it actually is. If UART is one that we just mentioned, but there's SPI, there's I2C, there's all kinds of different protocols that are used for communication on a device.
And that's at like the physical, electrical
Yes.
level. That's what you're looking at.
Yes.
You're not even talking about network communications or anything to that level yet. You're like, still wait,
Yeah, the up and down of the actual binary.
The electrical signal.
Yeah, the signals that's passing from the different parts of different components on a device. And because it allows you to record it and you can try translating it from all these different, protocols, you can just try and try and try until you figure out what it actually is. And then you can slowly go after a device more and more. And it's nice because as we're all familiar with like network and web app, there's all kinds of additional controls people have applied to a device because they know that bad guys are going to try and sniff a network connection or sniff whatever various ways that you're communicating from your laptop to some back-end server. So we protect it using SSL and TLS and SSH and all kinds of encrypted tunnels. On the hardware, though, it's much less common. And you're going to be dealing directly with things that are in clear text, which means that you might see data transiting that they think is secure, but is actually like, a username and password just going in clear text because they don't expect someone to take apart a device and look at it.
So from the attacker's perspective, you buy some sort of device, crack it open, you could potentially use a logic analyzer to see a username and password transiting on the device, which then you might be able to abuse from a network perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's the same, if they're assuming no one's going to crack it open, it might be that same password across all devices. Right?
Yeah, it's not uncommon to see, especially like with cheap consumer electronics, where they'll use the same username and password for the actual like services that are running on a router or some kind of like smart speaker or something of that nature. So you can crack it on one device, but it applies to many. So you have a one-to-many attack.
Almost like a shared local admin password.
That's exactly what it's like.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you pop one box, now I own all the boxes.
Yeah. Now, and granted, they've gotten a lot better recently, especially companies that care a lot about maintaining their status and not being seen as having problems with security. So your Apples, your Samsungs, those types of companies have created unique devices or unique usernames and passwords, and there's a lot of additional security on their devices, but on a lot of the less expensive stuff, you're getting things that they're just trying to pump out as cheaply and as quickly as possible.
Together, make the buck, and move on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I guess be careful about if you're buying like smart devices for your home or something like that. It might be a little bit better to not skimp and get something a little more reputable.
Yes. And even nowadays there are, for like home automation, for example.
I know you do a lot of that.
Yeah. Which someone in my industry you would think wouldn't do something quite like that. But it's just because I just find it very fun. You can even make your own stuff now. Like a lot of these things are like pre-designed to like communicate over these different types of Zigbee, Z-Wave types of wireless connections that you can actually make a device that controls, lights going on and off. You don't have to buy it from another company. But if you do, buy it from a reputable one so that someone sitting outside your home can't disable your alarm.
Sure. Be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I know you were kicking around a bunch of different stories with some of the other guys in the office today, but have you been able to settle on one that you have for us today? And I don't know if it's going to be a hardware. You did a lot of physical stuff. We've got one we're going to tell for sure of when we did a physical together, but what do you got for your story first?
Yeah. So, it was kind of hard. A lot of the stories that I like to tell with my friends are ones where I do something where I embarrass myself in some way or another. So not something that would be great for permanent media on the internet, but okay. So, as far as the story goes, one of the ones that I thought was kind of interesting was actually fairly early on in my pen testing career and is connected with some of the first hardware stuff that we ever got to do. I was working with one of the other newer pen testers at the time, and we had been asked to do some work with a bank, and they
I might remember this story.
they wanted us to test their ATMs, and they wanted to know, what is the actual kind of, security issues that we could potentially be facing with these things. And there are a couple of things that ended up being connected as a result of this. One of them is that they had initially asked us to try and break into an ATM and see if anybody noticed.
It's the one that's actually like out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And immediately my first thought was like, that sounds like so much fun. Like, I'm definitely going to try and do that. And my second thought was, I could get shot.
Yeah.
So
it's a realistic concern.
So we had a conversation with the bank, and we told them that, there's usually like either police or there's some kind of armed guard, or is there anything that we would need to be worrying about that they may normally have?
Who are we going to notify?
Yeah.
We don't want to go bad quick.
Exactly. So we ended up talking to them, and they said, yeah, you're probably right. That's probably not a good idea. Why don't we just, we'll give you access to where we have our, ATM, and, we'll see what you can do with it. And I was very excited by this. So flew out, me and one of the other pen testers. And when we got there, I had been really ready to, spend some time, do some lock picking, seeing if I can, get the doors open, see what we can figure out to do with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being so easy to open the cabinet through lock picking that it genuinely took just, a handful of seconds to open it up. And
So you just
yeah, and like, it wasn't even hard. It was, using a standard tension wrench, and you raked it a couple of times and just basically popped open. So not all ATMs are that way, but, older ATMs.
Probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And
it was just one of those things where like, probably wasn't a super well-maintained lock. So
sure.
we got that open super quick. And then from there, there's a Windows PC kind of built into these things already.
Sure. So embedded Windows 7 or probably XP back then.
Yeah, it was, I think this one was 7, if I remember correctly. What we were trying to do is trying to do a kiosk escape. We wanted to escape the interface so that we could, the interface that you see at the front of the ATM.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize this. When you see a screen on whether it's an ATM or some other sort of order, usually that's a regular computer in the background, and there's just an application that's basically kiosk to the screen. And if you hit the right symbol on the screen, or sometimes there's different things you can do, but all of a sudden you'll just get to a Windows desktop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they have gotten much better about this over time. And they've tried and prevent these kiosks escape. But I mean, this was a while ago. And, we connected a keyboard and a mouse up to the internal computer that was wireless. We shut it so that we wanted to see how quickly someone could come up to an ATM, open it up, attach a keyboard and mouse to it, close it, and then attack it, maybe from
Across
inside of a
the
car
parking lot,
or whatever it might be. And we opened it, we put the wireless dongle on there, we close it back up, and we start trying to get this thing out of kiosk mode. And it at first ended up, we got thwarted a fair bit, which was a little surprising. You do all the standard things you try and do to get out of kiosk mode. But we went back to the system at one point, and we knew that when you connect to there's usually on an ATM, you'll see a headphone jack.
Mm-hmm.
The reason you have a headphone jack is people that are, hard of sight, they need to be able to interact with ATMs just the way that all of us, would typically deal with it. And so they have a system that's designed to speak out, what's on the screen and all that kind of stuff. Exactly. Yep. And when we connected a headphone jack, we just wanted to see if it would change anything in any way, because we knew that Windows, reading out these menus is using probably the inherent Windows functions that have that capability.
Sure, the accessibility mode.
Exactly.
Yep.
So when we connected that, it actually ended up just allowing us to trigger sticky keys and pretty much everything else you can think of. It disabled a lot of the kiosk-based requirements.
Oh, really? So you just
controls.
had to basically stick the headphone jack in and then, yeah.
Yeah, so we immediately were able to do a sticky key. We were able to open that, get a help menu through something that popped up along with that same window. I forget what it was, but it was something else that was designed for the ATM to be accessible. And go through the help menu, do a search for prompt, open up CMD, and then we were able to pop a shell on this device.
Very cool.
And it was a lot of fun, and it was really cool, and it was that first time getting to kind of like interact with a physical device in kind of a unique way.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, that was before you got into any of the actual hardware stuff you do now, right? So
right.
Kind of like a bit of an origin story.
Yeah.
Some cool stuff with an ATM, and you're like, hey, this is different and not a pen test, and it's still in the same ballpark.
Yeah. And connected to that was after we did that, they let us open it up and just kind of try and mess with it in general. And that was when I had connected, the first time I had actually ever connected to something called a JTAG, which is an interface for interacting.
I think that's what I was thinking of before when I was asking about the UART, like JTAG. That's like a couple pins you hook up to as well.
It is, yeah. So JTAG is a method of, it's not a standard technically, but it's a standard also.
Yeah, okay.
Like all the different manufacturers kind of have their own way of implementing JTAG. But it was really interesting because we got to actually dig into the guts of the bottom part of it. So that you have the PC at the top usually, and the bottom which is where all the money comes out.
Yeah.
And within that, there was what are called cartridges. And the cartridges are things that all the dollars are put into, and they feed out into a system to get the money out of it.
Sure.
And there's control boards in there. And in this particular device, the control board was exposed. And we were able to connect to it and actually interface directly with the microcontrollers that were in control of the various portions of the cartridges and everything.
Jackpot? I heard you use that term earlier. Jackpotting it, right? When you get the money to fly out of an ATM?
That is when you get the money to fly out. We didn't at that time, but we subsequently, we've the team
figured that out.
The team has figured out how to do all that kind of stuff, and I can give a shout out to Caleb Davis, who pure genius of a person, who's one of the people that has been able to do that kind of stuff, and really, really cool.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we got to touch on our story really quick, and I'll set this one up. I haven't actually told the story on the podcast yet, but this was probably 2017 or 2016.
Yeah.
But I remember we were doing a physical for, we'll just say, an aerospace company.
Yeah.
And we were out in the Midwest. It was extremely cold.
Freezing.
I don't think you had ever experienced Midwest in January before.
We were the last flight to land before they would not allow other planes to land at the airport.
Yeah, and then we just drove way out into the through a bunch of fields and stuff. It was like 2 hours outside of where we landed, and we finally got out there. I think we were planning to be there for 2 or 3 days, and this was an aerospace manufacturer, so we knew they had super, super crazy security, but we didn't really know what to expect. We couldn't see that much. But the cool thing that you thought of that ended up saving the day was we were trying to figure out how we might be able to blend in. And, aerospace, we're like, let's get a safety vest.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that one of your friends was working at, where he was working, maybe we shouldn't say where he was working at the time. He was working at a place that had...
Manufactured the vest. And actually, we believe was the actual manufacturer of the same vest. For this aerospace company.
So we had a vest that was printed with this, and we're like, well, maybe we'll be able to figure out something to do with this. And all I remember, I think we were supposed to be there for like 3 days, and the first morning we pulled up, there was a Coke machine, or a guy in a Coke truck coming through, and we're like, he might be going to the loading dock, like, just follow him. So I was driving, I drove back around to the back of the building, you popped the vest on.
Yep.
And I think the guy held the door open for you, basically, and like
he did, yeah. So you dropped me off, and I just called you so that it looked like I was talking on the phone for a little bit, and waited till the guy was done unloading and getting the door open, and
or maybe you went and held the door for him.
I held the door for him.
Yeah, as he brought in his stuff.
And went in, snuck in through the kitchen, and then went to the cafeteria was right there. So I sat down in the cafeteria because, lo and behold, there's an ATM in there that had a network jack connected to the open network jack that was sitting there. And then I think it was really basic. It was like responder, or we found like groups.xml or something on there, pulled the data. We were able to.
Yeah, and then I remember, I think you went and took a lap and dropped a bunch of USBs.
Yep.
And then just left again while you were wearing this vest.
We got breakfast.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. We were done by 9:30 in the morning, and we were supposed to be there for 2 days. So we finished this up, talked to the client and everything, and then I remember you called up. I was like, there's no way, we're stuck here. They're not going to change our flights. Like, they're within however many. Like, no, I'll get it done. And you called up the airline and somehow convinced them to change both of our flights back. So we flew all the way there, drove all the way back, and we're home like in less than 24 hours.
And somehow they actually refunded us some money for the flight. I don't know why exactly, but like they actually made the flight cheaper for us.
Yeah, I don't remember. Like the whole thing with the flight was like, how are we going to get home? And it's going to be a huge, and then you've had it all figured out in like 15 minutes. I'm like, wow, you're really good at social engineering over the phone too. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it was fun. It was great. It was a great project and it was a lot of fun. You're a really fun person to do physicals with. You've done it a lot.
Yeah. Well, I like doing them, but Matt Barnett on our team now, he's the king. Like that's who I've been calling for the last few years whenever I need a physical, because he's
I'm always hearing the stories.
Yeah, he does some wild stuff. We're gonna have some more of Matt's stories on the podcast eventually.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
I really appreciate it. It was fun chatting. Thanks for joining us for another episode of War Stories. Don't forget about your CyberCoffee, because you can achieve better coffee if you drink CyberCoffee.
Thanks again.
Thanks.